Yeah, we will begin also next with the U.S.-China meeting. So Antony Blinken, Secretary of State here in the United States, just visited Beijing. Now, this was a closely watched moment, and we've been waiting for this, quite frankly, because this was supposed to happen earlier this year. But you may recall it was suspended after that big balloon, that Chinese balloon, what they called a spy balloon all over the media, was shot down. And so, but anyway, the meeting actually happened over the weekend, and you can see here Secretary of State Blinken shaking hands with Xi Jinping, the Chinese president. So they met on Monday. This was yesterday. This is the first visit by an American cabinet level official since 2019, and both of them agreed. One of the major things that was happening on this trip was an agreement to get more flights between the U.S. and China. This is why you've seen, probably if you've been following some of the different markets, you'll notice that airlines have been perking up a little bit. Well, part of it is due to the fact that travel is rebounding back to pre-pandemic levels. But another reason is because there's anticipation here that we're going to see more U.S.-China flights resume. There's been a lot of tit for tat going on in these trade wars and this Cold War we have with China. And anyway, so this is all good news for two countries, by the way, who are at each other's throats and who are nuclear powers. We want to see peace between the United States and and China. Dialogue is never a bad idea, right? Diplomacy is not a bad idea, and unless the U.S. can broker and China can broker some form of peace, the alternative is a deepening Cold War that could turn hot, as I've told you before. That war would be incredibly destructive, not just physically destructive, but it could be economically destructive. It could be destructive in many other ways, too, culturally destructive. It could be very, very difficult. And if some members of Congress, by the way, get their way, they would go to war with China. Right? We've seen tensions growing here in the United States towards China, a lot of nasty, nasty talk about China. And remember, China's surrounded. We've been talking about this for years. I had John Pilger on our broadcast several years ago when he came out with his documentary on this topic. And this particular graphic here shows the number of bases, military bases, that the U.S. has deployed and has surrounding China. Okay, imagine you're China here, and imagine you're surrounded by all these military bases. This isn't a very welcoming kind of situation here. So China, gets a lot of bad rap here in the United States for its existence, for existing. China must laugh sometimes at the United States, some sort of upstart country here, who's been around for 200 and some odd years. Beijing's been a continuous city for nearly 3,000 years. China's been around for a long time. It's been up, it's been down, it's been up, it's been down. It's back on the ascent, and it has everybody nervous. They're worried about the rise of China because they know historically that means something pretty big. Even if you go back, say, to the Roman Empire times, you say, well, the Roman Empire was huge. Well, it was huge, but economically speaking, it was smaller than China and India, right? For the most part. I mean, China and India, their economies, because of their sheer populations, just dwarfed the size of the economies of the Roman, Rome and of the Roman Empire. So you go back through history and you see that China has just been there, and now, China is back on the ascent, and now the United States has, got it surrounded, with these military bases, and is very, very paranoid that China, is going to want to expand. And China has been expanding, of course, but a lot of it has been through commerce, making deals with Africa, making deals in parts of Asia, making deals with Europe. And the United States sees this as a threat, right? It sees it as a threat. If you look at these stars here, these are major U.S. bases now, and you can see, here's China, and you'll see that there's just all kinds of major U.S. bases, just surrounding China. And, and this is ironic Very, very ironic, because here in the United States, we don't think about this. We don't talk about all these bases surrounding China. It's not even part of our vernacular. It's not part of what we talk about. It's not a part. It's not a current problem that we face. It's a threat to China. It's a concern for people living in China. Like, why are all these bases surrounding us? What's going on? I mean, the average person, surely. But here in the United States, we don't have this concern. We don't have this worry. We don't have Chinese bases surrounding our country. However, Wall Street Journal this morning, interesting, Beijing plans a new training facility in Cuba, raising prospect of Chinese troops on America's doorstep. Uh-oh. Oh, what do you know? How the shoe goes on the other foot there. China and Cuba are negotiating to establish a new joint military training facility on the island, sparking alarm in Washington that it could lead to the stationing of Chinese troops and other security and intelligence operations just 100 miles off of Florida's coast. What do you know? So it maybe surrounding a country with military bases, and then getting surprised and clutching your pearls when they want to put a base next to your country. Maybe there's a better way to think about it. We talk about irony. I mean, this is pretty big irony, right? U.S. bases surrounding China, and then you add up the fact that the United States has been hostile to Cuba. I mean, very hostile. It's had opportunities to at rapprochement. It's had opportunities to make nice. It's had opportunities to broker a deal with Cuba. It's had opportunities, right? But the United States is just adamant to maintain Cuba as an enemy. Well, if you're Cuba, and China comes along and says, hey, it's just kind of like 1 plus 2. 1 plus 1 equals 2. It's kind of obvious, right? So now Cuba, courting China. And now, of course, it's a pearls clutching moment here for the United States. We have China surrounded with military bases, and now China wants to put one training facility, right? Not even a big military base where they're going to be stationing nukes, but just a military training facility in Cuba, and it's call for war. So it shows you the imbalance that exists here in the West. We really are in the final stages of empire here in the West. It's pretty sad. It's kind of Fat Elvis stage is where it's at. Anyway, we've talked about that before in the past. Anyway, by the way, that it's not something new. This is more ironic than this. This facility here in Cuba is not something brand new. The White House declassified intelligence last week to confirm publicly that Chinese intelligence collection facilities have existed in Cuba since at least 2019. Right? They believe that it goes back to maybe even just a bit earlier. So this would have been during the previous administration when China was getting set up in Cuba, right? And now they're beginning to kind of expand that.